I came across the concept of vertical development while doing my PhD, and I find it so fundamentally important for understanding each other, for understanding my environment, and for also improving myself and my relationship with the world. And I continue to work in this field, and I hope that in the next few videos I would be able to explain the concept, and you would be able to understand your environment a bit better, and also the people you work with. Hopefully this concept will give you more empathy and compassion and understanding for why people are the way they are. And so fundamentally, what this theory says is that we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. So that's the basic premise. The way we are is the way we see the world. And the way we are continues to change, and we continue to grow, or actually, we can continue to grow depending on our environment. Our environment must be challenging us, and it must be supporting us while we are being challenged. So then what happens is we grow from this stage to this, and we continue to grow. But for that, we should be living in a challenging environment. Challenging means not just poverty or sickness and all of that. In those environments, we don't thrive unless we are also supported. Challenging means that our thought process are challenged. We gain new experiences, something that's quite unfamiliar to us, and we grow. So how does vertical development work? Based on Jean Piaget's child development psychology, a number of research scholars actually took the psychology, took the understanding, and tried to see if adults also grow in stages just like children. And they found that yes, adults continue to grow throughout their lives, and there are different stages, very clear stages, and at each stage we think differently, and then our behavior is quite different depending on how we see the world, because the way we see the world keep changing as we keep changing the stages. But this doesn't come as naturally as for children. So they continue to grow, and they continue to go through stages regardless, right? For most of the children. But in adults' case, what we need is a perfect environment. And what is the perfect environment? The environment should challenge us, and it should also support us at the same time. For example, if people are dealing with poverty or sickness or a really tough environment at home without any support, then they don't grow. They are just spending all their time and energy dealing with the situation they are in. However, for example, if moving to different places, in my case, we live and work in different places after every few years. So that challenges my mindset, that challenges my perspective each time, but I'm also supported by my family. I'm also supported at workplace and my community while I deal with those challenges of different ways of life, right? So this is one example. In the next episode, I'll cover more. So I'm going to talk about Robert Kegan's theory of adult development. And I've been fascinated by his field of work because the way he looks at our development is through the lens of subject and object relationship we have with the world. So I found it very fascinating to understand that the main function of all organisms is to organize. And the main function of human organism, or the way human organisms organize, is through meaning making. So we look at the same things and have different meaning in our mind because we have different perspective, because again, we are at different stages of development from each other. So we can all look at the same thing, but if we are at a different stage of development, we are making different meaning of the same thing. So it's not the objective world out there, it's a world that we make meaning, and then we live our life accordingly. And we keep changing, we keep moving from one stage to another if we are supported and if we are also challenged. So I have also always talked about this in the previous episodes. It's important to remember that it's a stage, and we go through each stage depending on what life circumstances we face. So back to Robert Kegan's stage development. He puts us in 5 distinct stages, stage 1 to stage 5. So let's look at 5 stages by Robert Kegan. Stage 1 is called the impulsive mind, because what is the main thing here is our impulses that we are subject to. We cannot reflect on our impulses, so we are bound by it. And it's mostly young children that are at this stage. And I'm sure there is a stage before that, but we cannot reliably understand about that, because for this theory to work, we need to do an interview. It's called subject-object interview, and obviously children younger than that cannot speak. So stage 0 is before young adults, and stage 1 is when we can exercise control over our own movement. So young children can control their movement, how they're walking. They can perceive some basic sensation, and they can also understand others' moods. So if parents are happy or angry or sad, they can actually start to perceive it, but they cannot actually distinguish between what is and how it appears. So little children, when they are, say for example, standing on top of something or a big building and looking down and looking at little people walking there, they would say, oh, look at how little people are. They don't understand that it's normal people, but they appear little. So that's how they see the world. They cannot consistently follow our rules without any supervision, and they cannot control their impulses. So now let's look at stage 2 of Robert Kegan's theory of stage development. This is called the instrumental mind. And most older children, young adults, and also some adults are at this stage. And those adults who are still at this stage, they find it difficult to deal with the world. And I'll tell you why. So as I said, at each stage, there is something that is a subject to us. So we are completely merged with it. We cannot see it, cannot reflect, or cannot improve on it. And then some things start to become an object. So we start to look at it and improve on it and make it better. And then so every time something becomes an object, we then move on to another stage, and then something else becomes a subject and object, like that. So we keep moving. And so stage 1, our impulses was what we were identified with. We were subject to our impulses, so we couldn't see it, we cannot improve it. But now stage 2, we can start to see our impulses, we can start to control our impulses. And now slowly what has become a subject is our own needs and preferences and goals. So the entire world around us becomes the supplier of our need. So you may have seen young children or some adults who are so merged with their own needs and preferences that they cannot understand another perspective. At this stage, we cannot take in perspective from others. We are very embedded in our own needs. Now, let's look at stage 3, the socializing mind of Robert Kegan's stage theory. As I mentioned, in stage 2, we are very embedded with our needs and preferences, so we are subject to them. We cannot see them as objects. So we are our needs. We don't have our needs. But stage 3, that's what changes. Now we start to see that we have needs and wants, but at the same time, we also start to understand people's perspective, that there are different points of views. And stage 2 is actually also marked by a tit-for-tat relationship. We are always concerned about the consequences of what we do. We always do what you do to me, that kind of relationship. And stage 3, we want to belong to something, an idea or value or a group of people, and we become very loyal to our own communities. So it's very much like, I'm looking for like-minded people, I want to belong in a society. And this is mostly majority of adults we find at this stage. And but here we are kind of like becoming more rigid, or we have more rigid rules, or we have more rigid values. So it's very either or, something is good or something is bad, people are right or people are wrong. So we are very much rigid in our own ways of seeing things, but our preoccupation is pleasing people. Our preoccupation is getting people's approval. We are very focused on what experts say. We are very focused on the authority. Now, let's look at stage 4. Some adults are at stage 4, and this is called self-authoring mind. So you can imagine we are no longer subject to others' opinion. We are no longer subject to our loyalty with a group or what experts think. Now we start to form our own ideas or values. We start becoming self-authoring about our lives. So we take a stand. We know what's right or wrong for us, and we take responsibility for how we feel internally. At stage 3, we make other people responsible. So we think that other people can make us happy or sad or angry because we are very dependent on what they think of us. We are very dependent on others' approval. Stage 4, we have actually gone past that. Now it has become an object for us to reflect on. So we no longer seek others' approval to feel happy or sad or angry. It's our own emotion. And at this stage is actually marked by our firm stand, firm conviction, and theory or values in life. And we are very much driven by self standard, right? So now everything that was at stage three and a subject, now it has become an object. So we have relationships, we are not our relationships. So the relationship is there for a reason. We can see the plus and minus, and we start to draw boundaries, very clear boundaries for what people can or can't do to us. Now let's look at stage 5. Very, very few individuals are at stage 5 today, or those that have been studied. And this stage is called self-transforming mind. So remember, stage 4, we have our own theories, we have our own ideals, we have self-standard, right? We are self-authoring about our own life. At stage 5, we begin to question that. So at each stage, as things become an object, we can question them, we can improve on them. So stage 5, we start to question our own theories. Why do we have this theory and value and boundary? At stage 5, we become very, very expansive in our thinking, and we can question our own values because there are different values. We can question our own self-standards because now the self-standards could be completely different, or there are no standard. We become very, very broad-minded, and we become very open to dealing with the world. And you may have seen a lot of real spiritual gurus and who may be at this stage according to the theory, where I remember an example of Ramana Maharshi. Someone asked him, how do we treat others? And he responded, there are no others. So that's a perfect example of self-transforming mind. There are no boundaries between us and them. We truly start to connect with the universe. We truly become connected with our own intuition, and logic and standards and scientific knowledge are part of stage 4. Stage 5, we become more transcending of everything. So one of the most important ways in which we can look at this theory is to be more compassionate towards others, is to be more understanding of why people do what they do. The only caveat, as I have mentioned before, is that people at later stages can understand the people at earlier stages, but it doesn't go the other way. For example, when I'm at stage 4, I can understand people who are at stage 3, 2, and 1 because I have been there. I know what it's like to be at that stage and to see the world through that lens. But people at stage 2 or 3, for example, they cannot understand people at 4 and 5. So when we work with someone who is very embedded in their needs, all they look at you for is their need fulfillment and goal and purpose, please know that they may be at stage 2, and that's all they have to see the world. That's the only lens they have to see the world with. And also there are people who seemingly behave in a more people-pleasing way, or who are always quoting experts or other authorities, who are very loyal, who are very fearful of being really good for others, who always seeking approval from others. Please understand that they may be operating through a stage 3 lens. So it's not that they're doing it purposely or they want to be a certain way, that's their lens. Likewise, stage 4 people tend to have their own very individual standard and very clear boundary. So understand why they are the way they are. One of the things I wanted to emphasize, that being humans, we are not as simple as stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and cannot be labeled in those clear-cut terms. That's just an idea to help us understand the different stages, different perspectives, and different capabilities that we develop over time through stages. We are also always transitioning most of the time, depending on, again, our environment. If our environment is allowing us to move and transition, then we are constantly progressing and transitioning. So you will find people who show the attributes of stage 2, 3, or 3 and 4, or 4 and 5. So because we are kind of always moving from one stage to another, if the environment is promoting that growth. So that's very important for us to understand. My main intention is for the general awareness of just the basic fundamental premise that we are all seeing the world differently. We are all making meaning in a very, very different way. So as humans, we need to be more empathetic, more understanding, and patient with each other while we make this transition. And also, if we are not able to make the transition, if we see people who seemingly are stuck in their own way, we should also understand that perhaps their environment is either too challenging or too supporting, and they just cannot move past where they are, right? So these understandings make us what human beings should be, a very complex human beings, but also very, very understanding and compassionate when the time. So I would like to complete this video going back to my first introduction, which started with my friend's question about how do we continue to contribute in this world when things are seemingly demoralizing. And I said that they do seem demoralizing, but historically speaking, we are at a much, much better pace. We are more compassionate, and humanity in general is improving and not going backwards. However, things are becoming more challenging. And this is where I wanted to kind of discuss and explain why things are the way they are, because things are becoming more complex at a faster rate than humans are developing to embrace more complexity. So how do we bridge the gap? Sometimes it's just natural. The environment and the experiences will make us grow more and will take us to a more complex stage where we'll be able to manage things. But until then, we feel quite overwhelmed because the resources that we have, the mindset that we have is not as large as the problems that we are facing, and that is why it seems that things are very demoralizing. So what can we do in the meantime? Become very mindful and try to be getting into a reflective practice and understanding our own selves, and try to make a lot of subjects into objects if we can, through self-reflection, self-questioning, and critically analyzing situations, as well as looking at the system as a whole as and when we can. So how do we deal with this world that looks demoralizing to us? Although things are getting better, they are also getting more complex. So this is what we have been talking about. This is where the video started. And so in conclusion, what I would say is that it will take all the individuals as well as the communities and the systems at large to be working together. They are constantly working together. It's just our awareness of it will be very important. And we can deliberately seek to develop ourselves. If we think that our situation demands more complexity management, then there are places that can take us from one stage to another, that can train us into and develop us from one stage to another, or give us more perspective, a wider perspective to manage contradictions and conflicts and paradoxes and different things that are coming our way, to manage it more in a way that we are not overwhelmed or becoming pessimistic. We can do some deliberate efforts. And even if we don't do it, the environment that we are facing is so complex that we will be able to transition from that, provided we get the support. So that is the key. If we can support our people and our systems and everything that's working together to transcend from where we are today, from a simplistic either or mindset to a more complex however mindset, and looking at the perspective and be okay with it, that's how we are going to solve it and continue.